Hello, everyone. Welcome to AWS Made Easy. Ask Us Anything Livestream, episode number 39. It is Tuesday, March 7th. I'm Stephen Barr. This is Raul Subramanian.
Hey everyone,
How are you doing today?
exciting new week.
Yeah, very, very exciting. How was your weekend?
For me, it was actually pretty quiet. Last week I was in Dubai. We did the show from Dubai last week. So I was getting back home over the weekend. Uh, just a quiet weekend with some rest. So not much to report from here. What about you?
Actually, I was trying to catch up. It was a it was a bit of a crazy week last week, so it was mostly catching up. Did some videos that will come out to some other channel. It was really, really nice though. No complaints at all. Let's see. Yeah, it was really, really
Oh,
good.
and you have some interesting guests coming up this week, correct?
Oh,
We're
actually, here
flying
we've
into
got some.
Seattle.
Actually, here, let me give you a little preview of what's to come.
Everybody, and I'm doing exactly what I was doing or need to improve on some things. The feedback I got from everybody on being a community builder is huge. They're like, well, it's so awesome to have you. I'm like, why didn't I think of this sooner?
Well, it's really exciting. So, congrats on that. That's really fun.
Thank you.
And so that's cloud operations.
Yes, it is.
That seems like it's right up your alley. So, John Meyer flew in last night. We had him over for dinner, and then we are going to be doing some recording with Jeff, my dad, and we have some exciting other surprise guests that will be joining us. So I won't spoil that. But we're gonna have a lot of fun. So that will be later this afternoon, and that'll be coming out. Watch my my LinkedIn, my Twitter for that.
Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, Stephen is also now part of the AWS Community Builders Program. So yeah, we're looking forward to doing more.
Really excited about that. John and I are in the same. We're both in the cloud operations, and so it was fun kind of brainstorming about that. Yes, I'm in the AWS Community Builders, and it's really fun because it's a natural outgrowth of what we're already doing, right? Which is talking about AWS Made Easy, talking about AWS, trying to be a point of reference in the community, provide thought leadership, and then also just be a point of contact where people can reach out. That's exactly what the purpose of the show is. Reach out, have questions. We can talk about AWS all day.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so we have sorry, you had something else?
Oh, other thing. I wanted to talk about tomorrow is International Women's Day. So that's really exciting. My wife got these really nice, my wife Jo got these really nice flowers in the background. These are calla lilies. Actually, let me put them on screen. There it is. There we go. We'll do a zoom in. It was really cool. So I was really glad she did that. And then also, I wanted to share this. This is pretty cool. This is this children's book called Ada Lovelace, Poet of Science. I want to read one page of this really quick because it's really fun to celebrate kind of especially women in technology and the trajectory, and to think all the way back to the very beginning. So this is talking about Ada Lovelace, who wrote basically the operating system for Charles Babbage's analytical engine. So Ada imagined the analytical engine, writing text, composing music, reproducing images, even playing games like checkers or chess. But before the machine could do any of these things, the symbols and rules of operation needed to be changed to digital form. Today we call that programming.
Correct.
So
she's credited with actually creating programming.
Exactly.
It's pretty amazing.
I came up with the operating system for the for basically the analytical engine, which is a steam and valve powered calculator. And then I was kind of reflecting on that, thinking all the way to the present time. It reminded me of a article I just saw. I'll put this on the screen. 1 second. Well, the CTO of OpenAI is Mira Murati. So it's kind of neat thinking in this 100-year time span, we've gone to Ada Lovelace creating this programming language for the analytical engine, all the way to what she was thinking computers could do, and now Mira Murati, being the CTO of OpenAI, actually getting computers to do that.
No, I think it's incredible. All of these contributions that have been made. I just wish there were a lot more women contributing, because, I mean, I think the perspectives, the approach that they bring to the mix is phenomenal, and every organization and every team needs that to actually do better. So, yeah, I just wish we were constantly doing more to bring more women into engineering, bring more women into these teams, make it easier for them to continue long careers in this field. I think there was a period through the 90s and early 2000s where I don't believe that we had the right culture within the tech industry that fostered more women in here. So I think that's a bad on us, and we need to change that.
Well, it's really neat seeing it evolving. Like, I was reflecting a bit on my day-to-day work life, and then it's very, very. I work with a lot of women in my day-to-day work life, and really, it's been a really great collaboration. And I can see locally within ARIA CloudFix, it feels very equal. And you're right. I wish that was true of every tech person's experience, and hope we get there.
Absolutely.
To keep pushing that boundary. And I'm very grateful for the women in my life, especially my wife, because everything in life that's worth it. So I'm very happy for that. And I know you have wonderful women in your life, Raul.
Yeah, starting with my mom, my wife, in fact, even my grandmother. They've all been amazing role models in my life. And yeah, I wouldn't be here without them. So we owe a great deal to them. And more importantly, I think I'd also like to put out an open invitation. We would love for anyone who is in tech, anyone who is in this cloud business, we would love to have you on the show. This is Women's Month as well, so we would love to have you come on the show over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Please come and join us. We would love to chat with you. We'd love to understand and get your perspective on what's happening in not just AWS, but the cloud world. And yeah, we would love to chat with you. So please reach out to us. We would love to have you on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I put some links in the chat that I think could be fun resources. So follow those up. And yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
All right. Well, should we? Oh, I have one other fun aside before we jump into the main part of it. My older kids. I have a 10-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. They were asking about what a floppy disk was. Have you had this question yet?
Not yet.
And so I showed them this really cool thing. I would play 20 seconds of this because I do miss the days when computers were so much more visceral and had motors and gadgets. And so this person put together an actual, how do you say it? A synthesizer based on floppy disks and scanners. I'll play a little clip of this. And of course, that's the Sweet Dreams by Annie Lennox of the Eurythmics. Some of the coolest punk rock out of the 70s and 80s. So that was really cool. I do miss that computers actually had these big stepper motors that had these real nice, fun sound effects. So I'll put the link to that in the chat as well.
Just to be technically right, those were diskettes. The floppy disks were actually floppy. They were the 5.25 inch.
Or the 8-inch.
Or the 8-inch ones, exactly. So I've seen the 8-inch ones. I've actually used 8-inch ones. I have used the 5.25 inch ones. And these ones were the 3.5 inch drives that were actually pretty advanced. I mean, I remember the first ones were 512 KB each, or 128 KB or something like that. I think were the first floppy drives that came at the 5.25 inch ones.
But the 3.5 ones were 1.44.
1.5 megs or so. I think 1.2 megs or 1.5 megs.
That's
if I remember
1.44, I thought.
Yeah, 1.44. I think you're right. Is what they were 1.44. That is a pretty big step up. They were much smaller and had way more capacity.
Well, I remember
GBs now.
I had a copy of Windows 95 all on floppies, and it was like 40 disks. People don't remember the stress of, insert disk 37 of 44, and you're like, please don't have a problem. Please don't have a problem. I've been sitting here for 2 hours.
Oh, if you ever installed SCO Linux, there were 27 floppies or 28 floppies that you needed to kind of install SCO Linux. SCO Unix, sorry. What am I saying? It was Unix then. And the serial key had to be entered on the 26th floppy, and there were no backspaces. You couldn't edit it. You had to get it right in the first shot. If not, you went back to floppy disk number 1.
Oh, boy.
And I think I spent like 4 or 5 attempts trying to do this. A nightmare. And to think that something this small now has a capacity of 4 terabytes. We've come a long way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
So today we have a packed show with a bunch of announcements that we're going through.
Which one should we do first? Should we do OpenSearch?
Yeah, let's start with OpenSearch.
Okay, here goes. Okay, Amazon OpenSearch service extends Graviton 2 instances support in 4 additional regions. So,
this is an old announcement, but we just brought it back because it just, as we're talking about a cost and efficiency on this show, we are bringing up OpenSearch again. A lot of folks use OpenSearch because it's kind of a standard. It goes in a standard pattern of wherever you have an RDS database. If you want to do full text search, you end up using OpenSearch. And if you end up using Intel-based machines, you are effectively paying up to 30% more for the same workload. If you switch those over to Graviton, and if you're on the right version of OpenSearch on Intel, you could actually switch over seamlessly over to Graviton, and you could save as much as 30 to 35%. The performance of OpenSearch has been fine-tuned a lot on the Graviton instances. So if you're not using this, you're actually just wasting money. AWS makes it really easy to switch over. So upgrade to version 7.9 and make sure that you are switching over to Graviton as quickly as possible.
And there really isn't any reason not to do those two things, and especially for managed services, right? It's not like you're needing to patch this yourself, right? You're literally toggling a setting.
Exactly. So this is really easy to do. I recommend that everyone does it. We brought this up purely because, it's just a reminder. This service is being available in a lot more regions now. So there's no excuse to not use this anymore.
Absolutely. Well, how do we rate this then? I mean, this is, I think we've almost prejudged it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this simplifies. This is a 4.5 clouds in terms of an announcement. It's really easy. It's easy savings, right? And the reason why I like this is, again, Elasticsearch is used by so many, or OpenSearch is used by so many different organizations and so many different teams. This is the staple and a mainstay of most applications.
And if you haven't used OpenSearch yet, it's well worth playing around with. You could put in JSON documents and then very easily index and search them. And it used to be so when it was Elasticsearch, having to manage Java and build up all the indexes and stuff. That was really complicated. But with OpenSearch and just how it's evolved over the years, it's really easy to run. It's well worth it.
Exactly. And so I would say, again, if you are in the business of managing your own Elasticsearch clusters, spare yourself the pain and just switch over to OpenSearch, I mean, it'll reduce so many of the headaches involved in sharding and making sure that your clusters are all balanced and indexed the right way. OpenSearch just saves you all of that trouble and makes it really easy to use. So it's not just a massive savings on the overheads. It's just a lot more efficient as well in the long run.
Awesome. Hey, why isn't this the Graviton 3?
So I think the Graviton 3s are compute heavy, while the M6G and the R6G are more general purpose computes, where memory is a bigger concern. Because in these indexes, you want to load up more and more stuff into memory. There are very few scenarios where, unless you have massive amounts of data processing where you're doing slicing and dicing of the data and actually doing substring checks and stuff like that, that's when you'll need more of the compute. But for the most part, people end up using machines where the memory to CPU ratio is much higher. And that's where the Graviton 2s are significantly better. Graviton 3s are great when you have huge, heavy compute loads.
And I guess it's the time between the Graviton 2 and the Graviton 3 was so short. It was, 18 months? Which is incredibly short for a CPU generation. That
Correct.
It's not that the Graviton 2 is in any way deprecated or phased out or old news. It's still very, very relevant. It's just that they iterated so quickly to get to the Graviton 3, which
Correct.
is now not even now we have Graviton 3E.
Yeah, we have the 3Es available, and we covered that 2 weeks ago, I think. Yeah. So check out that episode if you want to dive into the details of the 3E. But yeah, these are still very relevant. 30% savings over Intel. I think I came across a stat recently which said that the vast majority of OpenSearch clusters are still running on Intel, and therefore, just the potential to get onto Graviton is huge. And again, it's also a question of how long have these migrations been tried and tested on these particular platforms. They have done an enormous amount of testing on getting it to work on Graviton 2. And that's 30%. 30% is not a small bump.
Well, it's interesting. I wonder if this is like, they used to say no one ever got fired for going with IBM. And I wonder if it's the same with Intel. I was talking to our AMD colleagues, and they have a similar offering in terms of better price performance than Intel is their they're one of their big value propositions. And it's the same thing I think that they face, is right. No one ever got fired for going with Intel. But then if you zoom out, what's the price performance is you have a lot of opportunity to get better price performance either with.
I think it's less about that choice, and I think it's more about the fact that the defaults on your console are Intel. Like the first ones that show up on any search are the Intels.
And you just don't think to change it.
Yeah, you don't think to change it because, like, if you look at all the instance types, the base instances, like an M6 or an M5. An M5 is an Intel. An M5A is AMD. So it'll show up lower in the search. And then an M5G shows up third in that search. So, or an M6G will show up third in that search. So I think it's just behavioral economics. Whatever shows up as default is more likely to be used. Have you heard? So if you've not read this book called Predictably Irrational by Dan O'Reilly, I recommend you read it. It's a pretty amazing book. And it covers a whole lot of case studies that cover scenarios like this. I think there's a case study that he talks about where they had a similar scenario with organ donation. A bunch of Scandinavian countries ran huge campaigns. Yeah, that's the book. They ran huge campaigns about trying to get people to donate organs, and they still had like 10% take rates on these on people basically donating organs. So in one of those countries, they decided to kind of flip things over, where instead of asking people to sign in to organ donation, they basically switched that out and changed the question to say opt out explicitly
Oh,
if you want to opt
interesting.
out of organ donation. And suddenly that number flipped. They got 90% donors for organ. And it's just behavioral economics. There are so many things that we do where we think we're making rational decisions all the time, but the way data is laid out, the way things are laid out for us, make the choices for us by default.
So we're often a lot lazier and not as
Yes,
clever as we think we are.
correct. And sometimes the choices make us pick one over the other, just the way the choices are laid out. There's a lot of science behind, there's a science behind, for example, where milk containers are stored in a store. Very similarly, the choices you make, you think you're making very conscious, deliberate choices, but a lot of those choices are kind of engineered for you. When you enter a store, when you choose options on a site about pricing, there are decoy, items that are placed in a set of choices which will automatically make you choose one over the other. It's quite fascinating. Just in this book, there's actually an example of how Wall Street used this mechanism to price the Wall Street Journal used one of these techniques to price their newspaper and online subscriptions. It's fascinating.
Okay, so I like that paper, but then their pricing, they always have these great promotions, and you think, oh, I could get on this $1 a week for three months, and okay, but I have to remember to then find the next promotion because
Yep.
I don't want to pay the $50 a month or whatever it reverts to at the end of the promotion. They're good at that. I could definitely
very
tell.
good at that. So yeah, I mean, check out this book. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading this years ago, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Neat. All right. Well, let's have a quick word from CloudFix, and then we're going to transition to our next one, which will be let's do code scans next.
Yeah.
All right, here it goes.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, this is code scans for Lambda functions with Amazon Inspector now in preview. So Amazon Inspector. So this is looking at scanning Lambda functions for software vulnerabilities. So this is things like...
Correct. So we already have Amazon Inspector that reviews your EC2 instances and a bunch of other setups. Lambdas, as they're growing in popularity, as a lot of folks are starting to use higher order functions, it becomes imperative that you're checking these for security concerns, because these are the things that could potentially cost you a lot of money. Like one incident where a certain service, a certain compute resource gets exploited by an external party could just cost you a lot. And the reason why I picked this one for this week is, given that Lambda the Amazon Inspector makes it so easy to inspect, figure out whether you have data leaks, whether you have encryption not in place, whether you have other, flaws like injection. You can go fix them very easily. And just a tool that's out there ready for you to use without you having to, put in a lot of effort on your part, just seems like an easy win.
It'll catch SQL injections. So SQL injections, for those of you who don't know, this is what they look like. You have something like insert into users where, and then you grab some input right from the outside world, not checking it, not sanitizing it, and then you end up with people using that badly, people putting in a terminating parenthesis, either through a mistake or through a malicious actor, and you get this. This is called a SQL injection, where all of a sudden you can.
There are enough case studies out there where this event body username could literally be a delete operation where somebody ends up deleting your entire database and your entire table. So yeah, it can cause a lot of serious issues.
Well, there's this famous comic.
Yeah.
Did you really name your son Robert Drop Table Students? And this is what SQL injection is when you when you can do this. Okay, so CodeScan will actually find instances of this, and then telling you that you can, hey, this is going to be an issue for you.
Exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, all of these will also show up in your security hub as incidents. And
yes, routed to AWS Security Hub.
You can, correct. So you can basically manage all of your security violations or audit, misses, and you can go fix them one by one. So they make it really easy to inspect all of these, figure out where you might have flaws, and fix them very quickly.
Yeah, and then if you've ever hosted a public-facing website, eventually you will run into this. Someone is going to try this. It's just the nature of the internet, and you need to be able to. You always have to have the security mindset of thinking, okay, what if I was a malicious actor? Because at some point you'll be exposed to one. And so it's really neat, Amazon Inspector, because it's in everyone's best interest to be able to not have this happen. The customer is going to have a better experience.
Correct.
And they've been thinking about these kind of things for a long time. So it used to be that you could commit an AWS key to a public GitHub repository. And
it happened it was really common for that to happen.
Yeah, and then people would scan GitHub accounts looking for those type of keys and immediately start as many EC2 instances as they could mining Bitcoin. And that's not good for anybody. It gives a horrible shock to the customer, wastes Amazon's resources. So being able to scan and prevent these type of things is in everyone's interest. Correct.
So 2 other tips that I'm going to add to this particular one. Number 1 is if you have an external facing application or a website, add the web application firewall. It will show up as AWS WAF. So turn on the web application firewall. It's an easy way to prevent DDoS attacks, because sometimes when you build scalable applications, you might decide to scale based on the load coming in. And sometimes these DDoS attacks will cause you to just launch hundreds of machines at the backend or hundreds of Lambda functions, and will completely mess up your entire billing and costing. So by putting in the web application firewall in front of your application, you basically save yourself a lot of pain, because sooner or later, it is going to happen. Some malicious, party is going to decide that, hey, here's a vulnerable, system. Let's just hammer it, and it costs them nothing to do it, but it'll cost you a bomb, because at the back end, to service those requests that are coming in, you're going to be scaling up. And if you did not have limits to how you scale and so on, you're going to run into a whole massive amount of expenses. So that's tip number 1. And my tip number 2, I suddenly lost my chain of thought. Was going to be anomaly detection. Turn on anomaly detection on your bill. In fact, all of your resources, all of your billing, all of your CloudWatch metrics, because that's going to help you detect anything that seems out of place in your usual operations, and it'll help you jump on it right away. If you see that, something looks different. Hey, I just launched 100 machines because usually I launch 3. It'll detect it in the anomaly detection. You can jump on it right away and shut it down. So using anomaly detection is a great way to kind of, again, save yourself from a lot of pain in the long run.
Yeah, and that's the I guess not downside, but the scary side of AWS is that it will scale. It'll do whatever you ask it to, right? And so if you accidentally ask for 100 instances instead of 10, if you accidentally got a 0 in there, that's nothing to it. 100, 1,000 is nothing to it.
Correct.
But,
there are enough
it'll-
companies launching thousands of machines, running all kinds of processes, so it's normal. But for you, it might not be.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
all right.
Great.
Okay, so how do we rate this?
I love this one, so I'm going to give this simplifies, makes it really easy to see all of these vulnerabilities in your security hub, and I'll give it a good 4.
Awesome. I completely agree. I think that anything that can help you not make these mistakes so that they don't show up at the end of the month, but show up as early as possible, that's a good thing.
Correct.
Okay, should we then, let's go to the next one, which is light sail.
Yep. Let's do light sail.
Okay, so this is light sail for research. But I think before we talk about light sail for research, let's go over light sail, because I think that's one of the maybe lesser known services.
I think it's an extremely underrated service in the AWS service catalog. For those of you who've been around computers for a while, if you remember the VPS hosting that used to be available, where you would share a Linux box with a number of other people, and you had this virtual private server where it was kind of cordoned off, where you would get some amount of compute for almost nothing. That is basically what is light sail. You could get machines for as little as $5 a month to host anything from the likes of a WordPress website to, actually it's now down to $350. Wow. And those machines are available for you to just launch. They're launched in their, they're launched with a public IP, which is pretty amazing. You get your console, you get SSH access into it, and you can install whatever you want over there. There are various flavors of both Windows and Linux machines that are available, and you pay a fixed price of anywhere from $350 to $160 a month, depending on what kind of compute resources you need. So,
even thinking at $10 a month, that's basically a Raspberry Pi a year at actual prices, not what they should cost, but at actual Raspberry Pi prices, that's a Pi a year, but you're getting a much larger core, public IP address, 60 gigs of SSD. That's pretty good.
Exactly. And these machines are, this service is very underrated. And now that this is available for researchers, where you just want to launch a Jupyter notebook, just churn through some data that's sitting in S3, you can do that on these machines. You don't need to launch a massive M-class or a P-class machine with GPUs attached to it to do all of this stuff. If you just want a basic notebook, you want to run your basic, RStudio or Scilab or tools like that to just slice and dice the data, filter the data, just churn out the anomalies, do the basic analysis. These machines are plenty to do that for you.
And I really like how it's targeting this research or like academia community, because in the community especially, they're really focused on just answering their problem, right? They don't want to deal with infrastructure and all of that stuff. Where sometimes in tech, we can almost enjoy the diversion of, I get to build this cool thing now. And you have this diversion, whereas academics are not like that, not for compute. And so being able to say, like I said, move an IPython notebook into the cloud seamlessly, that's a big deal.
Correct. And more importantly, you don't need to shut this down because it's a fixed cost for the entire month. You can keep those notebooks up and running, come at it. The problem with a lot of the other instance types like the Ps and the Ms and all, they get very expensive very quickly. So if you're going to run these instances and just not, I was talking to one of the GMs in the AWS ML services, and he was telling me that one of the biggest cost drivers is, especially with people with ML workloads, is the fact that their teams don't shut down or shut off the SageMaker notebooks, and it costs them a bomb just leaving them up and running. Because they might spend like 3 hours a day on it, and the remaining 21 hours is just running idle, doing nothing and costing a bomb.
And it costs the
So-
same whether you're using it or
Because-
not.
Correct. And here you have these notebooks that you're just running for. You can just keep them running, get to it whenever you need to. And typically that fits better with the researcher workflow, where they're doing 10 things at the same time. They're looking at data sets, they're looking at algorithms, they're looking at, cleaning up the data, they're doing all kinds of activities. They're not going to need that same notebook all the time. So this is a very, very efficient, cost-effective way of getting started and doing a bunch of stuff without having to worry about insane costs.
Awesome. Well, how do we rate this one then? Let's see. Okay. On the one hand, I like this announcement. On the other hand, I wish they gave one example of.
Yeah, but actually, I think
you,
if you go to the Lightsail console, one of the templates is Jupyter Notebooks.
Well, actually, they've got the Lightsail for Research
they've got
webpage.
this.
Okay.
So they have a link where you literally have standard templates that you can launch, which have Python and R and the RStudio, whatever, and the Jupyter Notebooks, all of them already built in. So you can get started with them literally with one click.
Okay, neat. I'm gonna have to play with this. This is okay. And here's the fuller blog post of Lightsail for Research with all-in-one research environments. Okay, here's where all the examples
There it
are.
is. That's where the
Perfect.
example is.
And especially for things like R, that's gonna be annoying to set up. That brings in a lot of underlying C++ libraries.
Correct. And now all of that is available for you literally with one click.
All right. Well, I think then we're definitely going with Simplifies for this.
Yeah.
And the only question is how many clouds?
This is a 4.5 cloud. I think the other reason why I'm excited about it brought back focus on Lightsail. Just from a cost efficiency standpoint, there is a lot of stuff you can just do on Lightsail. Here are I'm going to add 2 more tips to this one. So number one is whenever you have simple things like WordPress websites or very basic thing that you want to put out in the cloud, don't create EC2 instances to do that. Or some people even create entire Kubernetes clusters to deploy a simple site, like a WordPress site or whatever, to put it out there. Instead, look at Lightsail and see if that suffices, right? Especially if you're a startup, you're building up your stuff, spend $5. If you need to scale it up later. The second tip that I'm going to give you is if you have any website or any front end that you've written in React or you've written it in Angular or whatever your JavaScript framework or TypeScript framework might look like, compile it in a manner that you can deploy it on S3 and CloudFront and service out of there. Don't deploy it on an EC2 instance that you have to figure out how to set up the app server, the web server, scale it up and down. Just let S3 do it for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. S3 is a great web host. You don't have to worry about security.
Exactly. Any static content, dump it on S3, use CloudFront. You will have amazing service, amazing distribution at a fraction of the cost.
I like that. And just, take the simplest approach first. Don't do
Exactly.
Don't set up Kubernetes and pods and all that stuff. You might that's one of those diversions you might never come back from. And we have a great comment. Jeff said, I was about to send that blog post to you. So I'll put this blog post in the comments. Here we go. And don't miss how hard it is for non-wizard to set up these complex environments. Now,
that's true.
Yeah. It is. It's fun how you forget because you've done it so many times. But yeah, it is really, especially with these research environments where they bring in lots and lots of dependencies, lots of tooling, like pandas. Yeah. If you do pip install pandas, it brings in a lot. And there's a lot of libraries that call other libraries. So being able to have this ready to go is neat.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has been through the pain of setting up a Docker instance with an Alpine version of the image and then try to install all these libraries, I mean, it is incredibly painful. So to have a lean instance with all of these kind of pre-baked in is incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we come back. We are going to talk about DevOps Guru. We'll be back in a moment.
Awesome.
Is your AWS bill going up? CloudFix makes AWS cost savings easy and helps you with your cloud hygiene. Think of CloudFix as the Norton Utilities for AWS. AWS recommends hundreds of new fixes each year to help you run more efficiently and save money, but it's difficult to track all these recommendations and tedious to implement them. Stay on top of AWS recommended savings opportunities and continuously save 25% off your AWS bill. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, so DevOps Guru here. I'm going to zoom in on this for a moment. This is DevOps. Can you see that? That's the DevOps Guru sticker. And I actually met a person from DevOps Guru last week who they've agreed to come on the live stream. So we should be seeing them in the next couple of weeks here. So
That's awesome.
We'll have a fun deep dive into that shortly. But let's get into this article. This is DevOps Guru for RDS.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, DevOps Guru basically uses ML insights on your operations across different services and gives you those insights like anomaly detection or optimization insights that you can use to better operate those services. And I love DevOps Guru for RDS in particular because it can give you a lot of insights about what queries are actually slowing down your instances or taking up a lot of memory. There's a lot of very interesting query-based insights that can help you better utilize your instances. Sometimes you have one or two queries that literally, use up 90% of the resources of your database, and that seems like a waste. You would much rather take that out of the database and maybe have something like S3 and Athena service those queries because you don't need them literally in a few milliseconds or even a few seconds. Athena would do a pretty neat job of doing these massive queries over S3, and you can keep RDS as light as possible and utilize it for the more heavy duty relational workloads. So yeah, I like the kind of insights that DevOps Guru gets you. It's almost like having another member on your team who's just constantly looking at all the stuff about how things are operating. I'd say it's another dimension of observability for your entire deployments.
Well, I was at this talk about DevOps Guru, and that was really neat because they gave us a little deployment, and in that particular one it was DynamoDB, and then they gave us a little script that would hit the database, and you could change this parameter to a node that exceeded our DynamoDB limits. Now, we had set the Dynamo limits artificially low just to make it possible to hit them. And then DevOps Guru told us, it said, okay, we are getting, I forgot the name of the error. We're getting a certain type of error related to DynamoDB. And eventually it said, well, you could scale this up or you can, it gave us options for what to do. So it was really neat having that visibility. And then what you said about SQL, it's the nature of SQL and query planning and optimizing is getting better, but you can still, it's really easy if you're not careful to have a what's called a full node scan baked into your SQL. If you do things wrong, you're not properly leveraging the indexes. And so being able to have ML saying, hey, this particular query is taking all of your time.
Correct.
That's a good thing.
And again, the fact that it does a bunch of these things proactively is pretty amazing. Like there's almost predictive maintenance for your databases, where if it finds that your cache hit ratios are low, or there are certain other kinds of parameters based on the query patterns you're seeing that are not aligned, or your sharding doesn't seem appropriate, then it can proactively predict that and at least make you or help you make certain decisions that help you tune and refine these scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty exciting to be able to see that, to get that insight. And to be able to not just have an insight, but what they said here, intelligent remediation recommendations to figure out how do you actually resolve this issue. So we will have our guest in a couple of weeks, hopefully next week, and talk about more about DevOps Guru. So we'll keep your eye out on the channel for a good discussion about that. So how do we rate this one?
This definitely simplifies, because having another member of the team that's proactively looking at this stuff and giving you remediations is, who wouldn't want it? So definitely say it simplifies, and I'd give this a 4.
And now they don't talk about pricing. Is pricing included with DevOps Guru?
I think it comes. That's a good question. I've forgotten about the pricing. There, we can look at just turn it on. No, there's no
pricing here.
Right there.
0.0028
per resource hour. Yeah. So it's a fraction of, I think it's like 10% of the cost of the resource.
Okay. And so I wonder
per
resource per hour. Okay. So I have to look into that to see how it would work for something like SQS. And okay, this is good to know. Okay. So it's not free, but it's not, you said this works out to about 10% overhead to have this being basically actively monitored.
Typically, yeah. So typically it works out cheaper if the larger your database, the larger your resources, the cheaper it works out. But I think on average, this should be about 5 to 10%.
Okay. Oh, here's an example. Okay. So if you have 5 buckets, that's 0 covered by free tier, EC2, 20 instances at 42 cents per hour. So that would use 600 resource hours on a daily basis, 480 for 20 EC2 instances. Okay, by the 15th day, you'd use 7,200 hours. Okay, so 7,200 hours. Okay, all right, neat. That is not too bad.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, for the value that it delivers, like imagine a database, instead of having to add another database instance, if you could just tune it to allow you to take on another 50% load, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's transition to, let's see, we've done Lightsail, we've done DevOps Guru. Let's talk about Neptune.
This is a fun one.
All right. Here comes our transition, and then we'll talk about Neptune. Here it is. This is Neptune Serverless now scales down to 1 NCU. Now, This is going back to reInvent when they talked about OpenSearch Serverless. And they made a couple of serverless announcements. And they, how do I say, they're serverless, but then it wasn't scale to 0 serverless. And there was a lot of chatter about the difference between serverless and scale to 0. I remember at the time we had used this particular reference here.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Right. So is it serverless if it doesn't scale to 0, or is it just another name? So this is exciting. Serverless now scales down to 1 NCU. So this NCU is a Neptune capacity unit. So before, if you were running serverless Neptune, you really had a minimum of 2.5 NCUs. But now that's less than half that.
Exactly. And if you really, dive into it. So I think this was one of the early episodes that we did, where we talked about why Neptune was still 2.5 NCUs at a minimum. We covered this when they launched serverless. But the repercussion of having a minimum of 2.5 NCUs is that the minimum cost that you would incur on running Neptune Serverless is about $3,500 a month. Now, which basically meant that, this was more expensive than an R4, R5, or an R5D, or even an R6D large, R6G large, sorry. So with this change where you have one NCU as the minimum, I think we're doing some math and it works out about $1,400 a month. And it then follows the pattern of the Aurora serverless. So this is very much like Aurora serverless, where at a minimum you just pay for the one ACU in Aurora. Here now you're going to spend one NCU. Actually, Aurora serverless goes down to 0.5 ACUs. This one is still at one NCU. So I'm hoping that this minimum is going to progress further to at least a 0.5 NCU. And it just makes it more economical to start leveraging and running.
Now, I was looking at Neo4j's pricing just as a point of reference. So Neo4j has the Aura DS, which is the kind of hosted Neo4j graph database, or that's graph data science. But I'm really curious to know like what it would cost to. There is no serverless Neo4j, I don't think.
Yeah, so Neo4j is very interesting because they take a completely different model. Neo4j has the ability to also do sandboxes, where you can snapshot your entire database, dump it in S3, and load it dynamically as and when you need it. And therefore, your cost can actually be significantly lower. The other thing that you can do with Neo4j is actually have multi-tenant systems. So you can actually have multiple databases or multiple graph databases on a single instance, which you currently don't have with Neptune. So Neptune is still catching up. Also on the visualization, Neptune is getting there slowly. So Neo4j is still, I think, the default for most people when it comes to graph databases. But if you're in the AWS ecosystem, Neptune does have a few benefits, especially if you're going to do a lot of data analysis at scale and you need to keep these machines running pretty much most of the time.
Absolutely. And there's now graph visualization in Neptune Workbench. That was, correct, I think, one of the big things. Here, I'll put that in here. This was one of the big, I suppose, criticisms of Neptune is that you needed to bring in some third-party visualization tool, whereas Neo4j's built-in visuals were pretty nice. So now they have.
I mean, Neo4j built Bloom. I mean, Bloom is pretty spectacular in terms of visualization. And the only alternative that we had till very recently for Neptune was Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
And Tom Sawyer felt like it was a decade or more old when it came to doing interactive visualizations. I'd say even this current version of the visualization has a way to go, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So this, as a whole, not just with Neptune Serverless, but with graph visualization, it really is making it a lot easier to treat Neptune in an exploratory way. Like you said, where you're not racking up this minimum $3,500 cost.
Correct. And I do believe that the cost of Neptune needs to come down even further, probably in the $300 to $500 a month range, where people can use it to explore data. Right now, the two big challenges in Neptune is loading up tons of data, loading it dynamically, and then starting to slice and dice it or explore it. That ingestion period, that experience lacks in comparison to Neo4j. So, and then if you have to pay a bomb on top of it to keep it up and running, I think it just becomes a deterrent. People just prefer Neo4j in that scenario. So I think this is a step in the right direction. If Neptune could get to half an NCU like Aurora and bring the pricing down, have the ability to do multi-tenant systems in the meantime, or even the ability to create sandboxes and snapshots, that would be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, a little micro Neptune would be great.
Correct.
Just for people to explore.
Neptune on light sail.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, let's see. As our final article of the day, let's give this our cloud rating. I think.
Yeah. So I would give this. Well, I think they're going in the right direction, but they need to go a little further. So I think I'll give this a 3.5.
All right, I agree.
For that,
3.5. Yeah, I agree. We want more. It's a 3.5 in a sense that we want more Neptune. We want to be able to use Neptune. I don't want to hesitate when I want to do a Neptune project that's just a personal project and isn't. I don't want to have to justify a huge expense to do it. I just want to experiment with it a bit.
I think in the scheme of all the different foundational data stores, I would have to say Neptune is probably the most difficult to get started with.
Well,
the developer experience in getting started with Neptune is probably the hardest. There's been tons done to simplify it, but I think a lot more needs to get done.
Yeah, I mean, you need to set up a VPC in order to access it. You can't just get a URL and a port number like with RDS.
Correct. It's way harder to start working with Neptune. Even loading up data, like trying to figure out how you're going to load all the data into Neptune. Then you have to figure out how S3 and Neptune talk to each other, and then set up the VPC endpoint so that you don't end up with a massive bill. So it's really hard to get started with.
Yeah,
one of the hardest data stores, in my opinion. Like if S3 and DynamoDB are at one end of the spectrum, Neptune is at the other end of that spectrum.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that makes sense, right? Neptune's pretty far away. All right. But I think it does get it simplified still. This is good. I mean, overall, it's making it easier.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Well, it's been a really fun show. It was fun to talk about and also reflect on Women's Day tomorrow. So make sure to do some reflection on that and how we can, as tech people, continue to make forward progress. And it was fun reviewing all the different AWS announcements.
Absolutely. And we look forward to our next show, which is going to be our 40th. I can't believe we are on our 40th show already. But yeah, reach out to us, please, and leave us comments on any of the platforms. We are on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, if I'm not mistaken, and Twitter. So reach out to us on any one of those platforms. Please let us know what you'd like to hear about from us. And we will try and keep bringing you new tips and tricks and insights from the AWS world.
And so then hopefully we have our DevOps Guru guest on the 14th. And I just got a notification we'll have a GP3-oriented show on the 21st. So we have some great guests in store. And then keep an eye out for some fun content with John, with Jeff, and possibly others later in the day. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to schedule a free assessment and see your yearly savings.